Hey, welcome to another episode of Deal Addicts. I've got my good friend Derrick Stricker on the show here. Derrick is with Stricker CRE out of Tri-Cities, Washington, a secondary market in Eastern Washington. Derrick, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Craig. Yeah, very excited to be on here and share some stories and behind the scenes stuff. And appreciate your podcast and what you're putting out there.
Yeah, thanks. One of my favorite things about doing the podcast is I get to reconnect with people. You and I have met on multiple occasions. We've gone on a couple SIOR regional ski trips. We've met at SIOR events. And that's kind of how we first met. Gotten to know you over the last, gosh, probably 5, 6 years, and you often bring your wife to the events, and that's always fun. So um, it's great to have you on here. I would love, one thing on this podcast, we talk about stories, and that's what makes us a little different. Stories behind the deals, and I'd love to hear about your first deal.
Yeah, I mean it is right. The first deal is big or small, so important to the career and kind of those early, dream boards in those late night hours and like, all right, what's going to happen? And these things we learn. But the first deal that I did that kind of stands out in the very first year. So this is 14 years ago almost that I started in this industry in Tri Cities. And the first deal I got done, truly from start to finish, was this 7511 West Arrowhead. This means nothing to the viewers, but two-story office, 1980, sleepy and quiet, kind of tucked off the main Simon Mall road that gets on the 240. So it's kind of tucked in and I never knew it was there. But what it was there was like 5 vacancies of office suites, and they're just very 800 square foot offices inside this 13,000 square foot building, and owned by a Seattle family, the Hogaboams. That name just keeps my head still. And I remember it was a senior broker, so I'm 28 at this time. She's probably 50, and wasn't doing a good job from the landlord perspective. And I kind of get different vantage points looking later in my life too of these deals and things. But I saw an opportunity. I said, hey, this is too small of a deal for her. If I just bring my attitude, enthusiasm, we'll get these leased up and maybe she'll let me sell this building. And I remember meeting me. I actually met her halfway between here in Seattle on a meetup, just to take an opportunity to say, hey, give me a chance, on this listing, these small offices, there's 4 of them, I believe, $700 a month, and got them all leased up real fast within 4 months after getting the listing, and thinking just how great that was to see the positioning. Okay, how can I get these listings? What's that relationship? How do I outposition senior brokers that maybe don't want to bring the hustle or the deal's too small, but uh, end up leasing them up, being very happy, kind of asking some tax questions. It turns out she was kind of a former CPA family, and let me put on the market to sell it, 6 months later. And it took me a year, but the first deal was just taking those new listings on, taking the opportunity, seeing that it was just these small spaces in front of me, but knowing that it could lead up. It may not be right away. It may not be that she may tell her next friend in her backgammon group about this young broker that brought some hustle and horsepower. And but it led to being a sale to a client I had actually a year later. I actually sold it to the Fire District County. And it was just the perfect kind of overlap of a few things. But that taught me a lot, but many things on how to set up that next best deal and doing the good work and doing the low hanging and doing those small deals. There's always something bigger to it.
Well, what were the terms of the first lease you signed there? I assume are they gross deals? So
Modified
gross
gross,
deal, how
everything's
long the
hit.
term? Do you remember your the fee? Because I remember the first fee I made.
So, yes, it was a 36-month term with an attorney, Gonzaga grad, go Zags. Um, Tawny was her first name. I think about that now. And I think the fee was $1,100. And I remember justifying it to my wife, which, $180 on this gift I wanted to give her. I got this cool patent frame kind of thing and for the office and everything. Like, okay, that's like $100,000 now before taxes, but okay, it's all part of the process. But yeah, $1,100. And it was a ton of money because the other leases I did in that space were like 12-month or 24 months. So that was the biggest deal I did was with that small law office. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, well, and it's cool to roll it from doing some smaller leasing, which, is a skill set, to then doing a sale. Um, you know, that that's pretty sweet too. Um,
Yeah.
so do you still, what's that building look like now? Is it that the fire district? Do they occupy the whole thing, or what's that look like?
Yeah, they no longer occupy it. So yeah, the Fire District County bought it, and they had some really strict criteria. They're almost like a industrial SIOR requirement. A number of left turns, certain areas, only this vicinity, and I think it makes sense for response time, coverage, all the things a fire district would need to put into play. But what was cool is I had to kind of lobby two different counties to come together to agree that this is the right location in general. Because sometimes there's some beef on you're in Kennewick or you're in Richland or I want Pasco, even though we're all Tri-Cities. So there's definitely some of that meat in that burger of deal making back then. And but they approved the location, the jurisdictions together, and they bought this building, occupied the whole thing. Renovated a lot of things because there used to be a lot of small offices and one big kind of family CPA firm on top. And they took the whole thing, made it their kind of main call center, and they built a new facility actually down the road from a house of mine, and came back to me and said, "Hey, don't need the building anymore. We don't need the taxpayer dollars. We can sell it now and go into our new branch or our new fire district station and get this back to the taxpayer dollars," which I appreciate the guy. So we sold that to two brothers that wanted to develop it and kind of renovate it. And I think that happened right post COVID, and it kind of looks almost exactly the way I sold it, 5 or 6 years ago, just with some newer designs upstairs. And post COVID kind of came with some new medical clinics that opened up just based on the location and kind of the drive time and the 240. But it looks very similar. I kind of wish it was what it could have become, but I see that as the challenge in Tri-Cities too. Reskinning and building, adding an elevator. Those components are tough to do in general, especially I think in a smaller tertiary market when let's just go buy land and buy new, and build new kind of thing.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little because a lot of our listeners are from the Northwest, Puget Sound, but I'm actually just got to notice uh, gosh, this is episode probably number 7 or number 8. And what's funny about it is now I think it's been viewed in like 7 countries. So there's some people that might be listening from North America that have their own idiosyncrasies about their market. But what about Tri-Cities? Tell us a little about the Tri-Cities submarket.
Yeah, the Tri-Cities is interesting, right? And it's kind of crazy in terms of growth of what it was. It's not going to be $1 million MSA or a million person kind of MSA population. But when I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, it was 150,000 people combined, between the 3 cities. And really it's, 2 counties, 3/5 cities, West Richland, how they plays the game. And you see that it was kind of everyone's kind of different jurisdiction when really I came back to sell the Tri-Cities, the whole market, because we're better as a whole than just these pieces. And I think that's kind of relatively a new thing for our market in the last 10 years to be Tri-Cities, not Kennewick or Pasco. And really is that all 3 cities bring enough to the market to be a real player. And so now, it's 2025, we're really 420,000 people big, basically. We're 30 minutes from Hermiston and the Oregon border, on the river. We're an hour from Yakima. We're 2 hours south of Spokane. We're the second largest MSA besides Spokane. And I use Spokane as like a big brother kind of, look at, all right, how are they doing? It's all relative. A lot of the pipeline, kind of that Salt Lake City, Boise, Spokane, Tri-Cities, besides other stuff coming, all affects it. But at the end of the day, Richland is our engineering. That's our Hanford Nuclear Reservation, right? That's where all this DOE, $2 to $3 billion a year comes in, and it's kind of that's always happening, which has made us kind of steady Eddie. We lead the league in most PhDs per capita, and they like to kind of flaunt that because we have all these people attached to the cleanup efforts out there. Kennewick is kind of all the stuff in between. It's your one regional mall we have. Simon Mall has a mall here. They're updating it for the first time in like 3 decades. Like the flooring is going away next week, and people are freaking out because it's the same salmon, yellow, 1980s, like mall walking kind of stuff. But that flux here, Yakima comes here for that. Hermiston comes here for that. Walla Walla, Prosser, all these places kind of come in. So really on a Tuesday or Saturday, Tri-Cities is kind of a big city living to this corridor out here in Washington State and Northern Oregon. We have the shopping and we have that kind of stuff, relatively speaking, to this constituent. So Pasco, so Kennewick that's your mall, that's your brokerage, that's your attorney, that's your fast food, that's your kind of things we have, your hotels, convention center. Across the river is Pasco, and that really is kind of the fastest growing part of Tri-Cities and in the state is, hey, that's our agricultural background, right? Definitely that's our diversity of Tri-Cities, predominantly very Caucasian and older in Tri-Cities overall. Pasco is a heavy Hispanic influence, and so we have a very large agricultural side of it, which is also what we're talking about, Craig, is that's where all the industrial stuff is. That's the one place that has product, new land to go do it, and infrastructure where the other cities are trying to figure it out. So Pasco has all this kind of food processing, industrial, ag background that was kind of the steady Eddie too, but really is a lot more sexy these days of deals getting done, financing, the new dairy growth coming into town, and it's kind of a domino effect. And so you take Richland, who's got all that kind of funding and engineers and education, Kennewick's retail services, everything in between, professional and golf courses, and Pasco. Okay, it's all about, a 17-minute corner to corner. 23 minutes if you're, my wife corrected me and saying, hey, it's longer now. And that's the growing pains. The traffic, the new stuff it is kind of 20 minutes to get from Southridge, Kennewick to North Richland. Then they get to East Pasco, where you and I are going to meet for a warehouse tour and that kind of stuff. And it's just going to keep going.
So, being an industrial guy, I've watched, I grew up in Western Washington, but my wife's family spent a lot of time there in West Richland. In fact, her cousins went to, is it Richland High?
Yeah.
What's their mascot?
The Bombers.
The Bombers, yeah. And so I remember spending a lot of time there, and I've seen the industrial part of the city grow. For instance, you're seeing a couple big cold storage facilities being built. You're seeing more distribution, kind of regional distribution that serves probably a 3-state area, and there's some truck terminals there well, just to the south of that, FedEx has a big truck terminal in Hermiston.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe touch on. I assume most of the people are listening are industrial people, but I could be wrong.
Don't shoot yourself short. You might have a wider audience than you know.
Talk a little about kind of the breakdown of those markets, and maybe touch on an interesting industrial or land deal that you worked on.
Yeah. So it is like, it's tough because, every city needs to have their own standalone stuff, from retail, industrial, office, and, but still operate as a whole. And people themselves have their own preferences of where they want to be, where they want to live, obviously. But it's interesting to see that Kennewick, we had industrial. Downtown Kennewick was the start of it. I might touch on that, that deal. That was what was it? I didn't name all my deals. I think that was called the Concrete Juice Jungle was that deal. And we'll come back to that one. That was kind of originally where all the distribution of actually, that's where all the Arizona tea products were made, canned, and shipped out of. And I never knew it until I was involved with selling it. But downtown Kennewick was at the core, crossing the 2 bridges of the Columbia River to Pasco, which gets, north to Spokane and out to Seattle or down to Oregon. Everything moved west. And so there was 110 acres of industrial in Kennewick. That got shut down by the port of Kennewick 10 years ago, which I was part of that to urbanize. It's right across from the Simon Regional Mall, so kind of a weird spot for all the industrial growth that would have came. So they shut that down, which all of a sudden really created a weird gap in Tri-Cities industrial market. All of a sudden, Kennewick just kind of took themselves out of that entire conversation that people were really looking for product, whether it be small flex warehouse to giant DCs or cold storage. There was just no thing. There's land that we just got annexed in, 250 acres after fighting FutureWise for like 8 years to get a fraction of what we were trying to get because Kennewick has no land. And it's closest to Hermiston. So all those providers down there in Hermiston that would like to be up here for other reasons, closest, hasn't been an option until maybe 3 to 5 years from now, going that. So Kennewick kind of took themselves out of that industrial market. Pasco's always been its agricultural side and the kind of farm side, more RDO, more John Deere, more that kind of trucking and that kind of thing and equipment. Some food processing for sure is a corridor out there. And then you kind of have Horn Rapids, Richland. So the other kind of corner of town, which is almost on the way out of town. And unless you're going there, you're not really going to go within that way unless you're working out there or have to go out there for kids soccer or, there's some more things now that bring you out there.
Well, the Horn Rapids Golf Course and the ORV facility they have there.
And that's why I first knew about it, riding dirt bikes growing up. That's actually came like full circle. Some random diesel truck pulled in a listing. I was walking out of Pasco. Oh, hey, I used to race you back in the day. Remember Jensen, old buddy? And it really is transpired from motocross and paintball and that golf course, which has now been bought, renovated, and built up now. All of a sudden, it's a really large industrial park. And that really is where you have Horn Rapids and you have Big Pasco, and Pasco, and those are kind of the two pockets that can house larger industrial. And I think the cold storage stuff talking about, a big connecting is the Lamb Weston. We have a large Lamb Weston production facility here. All the French fries you're buying come from Tri-Cities basically out here. And so the world's largest cold storage for a hot minute was there until we got displaced by, I think, a Japanese facility. But it's, 1 million square feet and multiple vertical floors, which is all very, very high tech for Tri-Cities. And that kind of opened up that with the DOE of they had large swaths of land to do, battery conversion plants and these other things that are kind of starting to come besides just whatever's connected to the Hanford nuclear reservation, cleanup efforts, commercialization, which now we have small modular reactors, SMRs, which is hopefully going to be a big piece and kind of connects to the data center piece of how to power all the engines and machines that will need to be in the future. So that's kind of all there in Horn Rapids. And so that's your best spot for 10 to 25,000 square foot warehouses. Buy land, go build that for your business. Hey, rent it out to a national tenant. I think most floor plates here in Tri-Cities are that I'm helping, but we have a large lack of supply of everything, but we don't have 15 to 25,000 square foot vacancies. It's so tough. And those people that are occupying those spaces stay in there until they have to move, expand, consolidate. So it's been a big user for owner users and small investors buying stuff out there in the Horn Rapids area. The Pasco stuff, though, is that's where SIR is kind of coming into too. Similar to Horn Rapids in some ways for sure, but it's more the co-brokers we're talking about, people at the ski trip that are, bringing in site touring. We're out in Pasco. That's where all the, Reeser Fine Foods, that's where Dairy Gold is opening their brand new, $750 million facility. That's where Amazon just opened up. They flew up that last 100,000 square foot so fast. Last mile with distribution. And so as soon as that Pasco annexes land in, because we're always looking for more land because we just don't have enough of it to sell to who's currently here, who's been trying to enter the market, and our own local owner users that very heavy ag can't find it. So as soon as we get 250 acres annexed in, it's basically gone in 12 to 15 months, and we're back looking for more land. So those are kind of the two spots, and that's where the AutoZone distribution center came in, 8 years ago, 420,000 square feet. And that's why I realized, hey, this is what this meant to be. This is what you would see in other markets when you drive by. More of those larger DCs and across the highways, is all the food and bev, basically. That's where all the, food processors, former reasers, and all those people are just either trying to buy whoever's moving out or buy more land and keep on that side of the corridor. So it's kind of interesting to see all that go.
So what, being in a market that you're in, I'm assuming that you can't, well, it's very difficult to just specialize in one asset class on the commercial side. So maybe talk about how much time you spend on the retail, office, or the industrial side.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Moving back, because I moved back from Chicago. I mean, grew up here, school at Gonzaga, started my career in Chicago. And there for about 5 years and came back and it was, all right, you got to be journalists. And I'm second generation. My dad was a commercial broker. I grew up kind of around this. Just never said I wanted to do it. I kind of fell into it by default in Chicago and realized that, hey, I really do kind of love this thing. And so my dad was a journalist, did stuff for Chase Bank, did stuff for McDonald's, did stuff for, and some industrial clients, but really never focused. And so I was learning from that kind of stuff, but I really wanted to be a little more specialist, but couldn't do that starting your game out. So I kind of came back to Chicago with retail dreams. That was kind of my thing. Hey, I want to help bring these places that, like a lot of new brokers do, I want to bring all these places I've seen on the markets home and develop and these things. And it kind of like 5 years into it, kind of shifted to an industrial epiphany. And that's when I kind of stopped doing majority of retail and other deals to focus on my SIOR and the requirements and the GFIs and all that kind of stuff to get those goals of kind of being the, industrial and office guy for the region of these kind of deals. So I would say I still owe, office, industrial, investments. That's probably still 70% of my time in business. I still do some certain retail, developed the retail before, and some other kind of products and land and other leases. But I try to be in the office, industrial, and investments. And the broker in my office, Jasmine, does a lot of the retail. She likes a lot of that and the tenant rep side of it. And so kind of a little bit generalist. But I try to do those three things. I mean, that's not being one thing. I don't think I could survive on just industrial, the pace of them in our market. But I think the office and the industrial have been the two things I like a lot. We have that product, and that's also what's growing because we didn't have remote work when COVID hit. We didn't have office is not a bad word in Tri-Cities, and it hasn't been. It's still we inherit attitudes in obviously, but we didn't really have big vacancies on the office side, and so those two sectors really helped get through weird times and also propel my career to do that. But I still have a sweet spot for a lot of stuff. I've still done Popeyes deals and some other things, and we manage retail properties, but I like the industrial, I like the office, and I try to stay on the investment side of it when that market's hitting. I didn't say anything about that juice plant. Let me circle back to that juice plant real fast.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it? What'd you call it? Concrete jungle juice or something?
Concrete juice jungle. So
Okay, I was close.
either word. I mean, it's a word sandwich, but yeah, it's like a 250,000 square foot assignment. It was 2017 when a co-broker reached out and said, "Hey, I need to go check out the site. It's where all the Arizona tea products are made." And I was like, "No way! I love downtown, and I would have known about that." Turns out I didn't know that. Wow, okay. And I went through it and saw it was just really kind of a shock and awe, and actually changed the way I take how I intake and walk listings the first time now. Learning from this experience was the facility was so large and so overwhelming, and had so many people running it that the building kept going on. There was 3 different large complexes. One of them was a 2-story warehouse, but just like almost like World War II style. Actually, it was the city kind of fallout shelter for the World War II, and very close to Tri-Cities, since maybe we were on a target for retaliation on that, how that went down. But it had an underground tunnel across under the street to the next building. So it's just really like, whoa, this is everything you could look for in a checklist of things a deal has, and all of a sudden this property has it. And the juice is being made, and the smells, and the equipment, and the ladies, and kind of bottling it and getting into the pallets and the pallets out. I came back 2 weeks later to walk through it again and get pictures. They're all gone. The ladies, the equipment, it was empty cans and those things. But it was very hard for me to kind of focus on what I just saw, and I'll never see it again. So I always take a video now, almost like a body cam style, when I go through these big facilities, because all that interaction I was trying to figure out the first time was gone the second time. Hey, what's that equipment do? I don't know. I don't know equipment quite yet in this industrial side, nor am I a scrapper, but through an SIR, we learn a lot about equipment and what these clients need. But anyway, They vacated the whole thing. They moved to, it got bought out by a larger company, moved to Walla Walla at a different facility. But it took me 3 years to sell it. It was super hard. COVID hit. Even though it's industrial and 200,000 square feet, it was 1940s. It had weird heights. It had 122,000 square feet in one building, but it was 60,000 square foot stacked on each other. And the basement was only 9 foot clear height. So who wants, a wine barrel storage? Okay. And that's about all you can probably get in there. Turns out it's a public market now, kind of like Pybus in Seattle, and renovated. And we'll get to that. But
Is that the one on the river?
It's right off the river. Yeah. Right on downtown Kennewick. And it's called a market, and they built it out. The developer who bought that has done some great things with it, but it took me forever to sell it. It was super hard. Everything about the deal that can go wrong did. Deed restrictions, kind of an arrogant very aggressive, not arrogant, aggressive CFO who was involved in the deal on the sell side of it. New company, new leadership. It was just very transitionary. And I'm in the bottom floor just trying to make the market work. I see jobs. I see downtown. I see if we can't fill this 200,000 square foot, which is an easy industrial requirement to fill, still in the market, it makes people look sus about Tri-Cities. Like, if you can't get that thing filled, why are we trying to talk about a 250,000 square foot DC in Pasco, Derrick? That conversation.
Yeah, you took it personal.
I kind of have to. I feel like if I don't, I've always learned to not take it personal as I hit 40. And all right, hey, I can't live my life. It's all on my shoulders to do this for the city in the name of GDP and economics. But, taking it personally, taking it passionate, that's still there for sure. But it did. It helped. That passion met that buyer who said, hey, I see the same thing you see. I see how I could renovate this, make this cool, make money on it, maybe do something neat about it, maybe do something that's not profitable, but pleasurable, to the town. And that's what he did. He relocated, he bought that. And it was a tough deal and got through that. But he put a big brewery that we had in town in the main thing, in the new tasting room. He put the whole market downstairs. So it was kind of cool because, it was a blight. It was a concrete jungle. It took me 3 years to sell. And, I'm pretty happy about it all. But people are like, that's weird. It took so long. But that kind of taught me about my market and the product and how to kind of position it in the future to get, good results for everyone.
So let's talk a bit more about that. Tell me how that deal was sourced, but and then maybe touch on were there any other industrial users that looked at it, or was it just redevelopment? But I'm curious because you're in a market. We talk a lot about SIOR on this podcast because a lot of my connections around the country are through SIOR, and I compete against about 25 or 30 in the Puget Sound area, and I think there's 2 in Tri-Cities. So maybe touch on how that deal came to you, and then maybe talk a little more about how it ended up being a redevelopment play.
Yeah, I think I was talking about this, kind of maybe touch it on the podcast last time, on our podcast that you'll be a guest on soon too, is that I'm not focusing on selling Tri-Cities as much as I had to before, because it's kind of known. I think a lot of tertiaries got a rise post-COVID, right? Because brokers and corporations and everything were looking that way more than the metropolises. So we're not selling it as hard as it needs to be. So that was the first big challenge of these deals, was trying to find those people. But there I was, in mid 2015s and 17s, 19s, going to conferences. ICSC stopped doing those a little bit, released frequently, more CCIM, more SIOR. I was taking classes before I was in the program. But meeting these guys and talking about, hey, I'm just Northwest. I'm east side of the state. You got lots of buddies and homies on the west side that can do these deals. I'm the east side guy. And that kind of caught on. I was just kind of going to these conferences where I met you and seen stuff, and I had, long hair and man bun stuff, so even a little more recognizable. And saying, this is Tri-Cities. We got stuff where we have fun, but we got product, and not everyone's trying to do it here. And so I kind of put myself out there as like, let's talk. And it kind of ended up being like referral, but really, some of these corporations want that main broker on the account. So it really kind of opened up this whole kind of co-broker collaboration. And that really kind of opened up and cemented kind of a strategy and an advantage I have is that I co-broker with a lot of people. I'm capable of do a lot of my own stuff, sure, but I'm a collaborative, collegial kind of guy that wants to share and brainstorm and get stuff up. And a lot of these clients, those bigger users, that broker's a record, and that's what they're dealing with. So that was an inbound, looking for someone who had industrial experience. I understood the market, and they knew I was SIOR and did recent deals. I just got done selling or about to sell those Sunnyside, Seneca fruit facilities. Those are giant, like 500,000 square feet and, $25 million deals.
Plants.
What?
Huge plants.
Huge
Yeah.
plans, right? So that kind of every deal leads to the next deal. And that's how I kind of approach it in my career, that this domino, good or bad, will lead to the next domino with the learnings and the wins. And so that was kind of, I met a lot of good people from the Sunnyside deals, at 45 minutes west, and big players and big users. So that when we got this listing, Refresco, the juice concrete, jungle, a lot of owner users came in. That's what the whole video thing was, is that everyone from the East Coast and Midwest called me for heavy specs, heavy details. And I had very limited. I had old ownership that wasn't really around. I got new, C-suite people that maybe don't care, don't have it quite yet, or that's not the main priority. So I was kind of, that's where, hey, I need to take more video of equipment, footage, what things are happening. But we probably had over 25 users come look at that facility. Like a ton. I remember a couple guys in Boston being pissed because they flew all the way over there and they thought the equipment was included, and the ceiling height was low, and they thought, but mainly equipment. But I found out that the ownership hired a third-party scrap person to come in and scrap all it out, cut it out, and sell it. But they didn't tell me that, so I showed up with these Boston guys, and they were pissed. They were like, "Where's all the equipment?" And I'm like, "Who are these people? Who are these crackheads taking all these metal out of here?" But they're hired, and so I was like, "Okay, it's big. It's got a big floor plate. It's very SIR friendly. It's the only thing in our whole entire market. Yet it's not going to be these people. It's not going to be 200,000 square foot user. It's a 60,000 square foot user. It's a 60,000 square foot user on the other side." And so now it's like, all right, price reduction. Hey, whatever we thought was comp, not the case. And kind of started talking to redevelopment plays of people and trying to, be reality. They'll be excited. Like, that'd be cool, but how are you going to finance that? But this is what I found. Found a developer. He was nearby. He likes things. He likes, kind of problem challenging properties to see it. And that kind of caught me a lot about just how I look at these, black and white properties, that really there's always a creative option. And when things are slow or weird, you need to explore that third option, because it may be looking right at you and you're just thinking it's going to be clockwork. And it was a creative play. And that opened up a totally different kind of trajectory in a few other deals. Actually, he's even connected to my other Javelin Juggernaut deal we might talk about too. So source that, co-broker, only SIR, like only one SIR in the region, which is nice. But yeah, Spokane guys, a lot of them up there, all the NAI black dudes, and you guys over there. So, kind of through those corners, triangulation, we kind of got the whole state there. But yeah, a lot of good inbound stuff. And the co-brokers really kind of what fueled some of that industrial and that SIR kind of level work I wanted to get into, which is kind of tough to find here locally.
Yeah. It reminds me of your market, reminds me a little, they're different, but you're positioned very well. For instance, Amy Ogden, who is an SIR out of
Yeah.
Las Vegas. I did a deal with her a couple years ago. She gets a ton of referral business. She's active in the SIR platform. She's different. I think she was episode 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and she gets crazy inbound referrals because she works at a boutique firm, knows the market really well, and a lot of people use that. You mentioned you're talking about how these people from Boston showed up, walked in and were upset because it's not what they thought it was. It reminds me, I did a deal. I did some work for Weyerhaeuser Corporation, and mostly it was the disposition. So if they bought, for instance, they bought, oh gosh, Plum Creek timber. Okay. So Weyerhaeuser bought Plum Creek timber, this goes back probably, they probably bought them 8, 10, 14 years ago. And in Columbia Falls, Montana, we had a disposition assignment for Weyerhaeuser, who's headquartered in Seattle. And I remember going out, I made multiple trips out there to sell. They had a big MDF plant and then another wood products plant that was probably 600,000 feet with
Wow.
multiple buildings on,
Mhm.
50 acres and rail and power. And then they had an office building. The old Plum Creek headquarters for Montana was in Columbia Falls, Montana. And I remember going out there for a showing, okay, because we had a boots on the ground broker from Montana, but he mostly sold houses, and he did a little commercial. But I
Mhm.
remember going out there and meeting this group. I think they're from California, and we had a bunch of video. This is pre-drone, like drones didn't exist, but we had video and a bunch of pictures. And we walk out, or I fly to Kalispell, Montana, rent a car. I'm going to be there for 2 days on this, and show up. So to really set it up, I think I got there on like a Thursday. We had a Friday morning tour, and I drive out to Columbia Falls from Kalispell, which isn't that far. I don't know, 45 minutes or so.
Mhm.
And we drive out to the front entrance of the plant, and this Cadillac shows up. The guy gets out, and he's like, This is not anything what I thought it was based on the pictures." Gets in his car and drives away. And we didn't get in the building. Um, we didn't do a tour of the market, and he was looking at a redevelopment, but it was the biggest waste of time of my entire life. Um, and but it taught me a lot of things, which sometimes you can do this and sometimes you can't. But you try to, looking back, I probably would have done a lot more qualifying, right?
Mhm.
I would have asked a lot more questions. I do that now. There's one or two brokers in our market that run with these kind of wackadoodle tenants.
Mhm.
So they sometimes get pissed because I'll ask them, 20 questions about the tenant because I don't want to waste an hour of my life when the use doesn't work. We don't have the power. They want a 1 year deal,
Uh-huh.
whatever it may be. But I'm sure you had some really interesting tours on that cool listing, unique listing. And those properties, I like, what's beautiful about industrial is it's not your typical space that like an office building. Okay, what's your parking? What's your rentable? How many cubes can I get in here?
Yeah. What's your
It's
load
really
factor? Yeah.
some yeah unique people that make widgets. Like I really like watching and doing manufacturing space because
Mhm.
I'm always curious about the next idea or widgets.
For sure.
So
The clientele that comes through the industrial side is it's a breath of fresh air because it's just neat, right? You learn so much from these people, what they do, and you're also like, oh, I guess that's how that's made. That does make sense. Oh, that's what you do. Oh, neat. Oh, you want to put in this building? Okay. You do. You come across some really cool people and stories, and the strategy. I feel like that's my favorite part about this job, and I feel like I got to use more of that strategic on mindset that I have in the industrial scene to try to get these deals done in a market. And I kind of operate within kind of a 90-minute drive time in Tri-Cities to make my market footprint bigger and a little more applicable to things I want to do and scale. And so it's definitely helped, and it's been very neat. And it is, you got all that juice and fruit over in that Yakima Valley kind of stuff. And we have all the data centers and just to happen our way in that Harbison area. And we have a kind of our own, definitely our food and bev and DC scene and energy. And so it's interesting. And you throw in wine. I have heartburn now at 40, it just hits the esophagus. So it's not the same, but also toast and glass. But that's kind of another part of the stool leg that's added in Tri Cities is the kind of winery scene, but also that hasn't quite taken off like I thought maybe it would have a decade ago.
yeah, that's really interesting. What are some of the projects you're working on now? Maybe some of your listings that have some cool, interesting stories of how you got them or what the product is.
Yeah, let's see here. What's some listings I have right now? I got this. Hey, this great 2-story office. It's in Sanford, actually, right there. 942, not by design. 9425 Sanford. It's a 2-story office that was kind of completed at the end of COVID. And, I wasn't the first set of broker on that site. And I think that it was, a scary time for a lot of people and just did deals. And so I kind of, came through me through a couple of different sources. Of architect knew of me and worked with me. One of the two of the people knew I was door knocking back in the day at their old location. So it all kind of led to me. And it's like, hey, it's a leasing strategy and it's an exit strategy, but it's a great building. It's basically new. It's, what was it? 3.85 million, which is like $280 a square foot, and built in 22. And it's 90% occupied. And so it's nice as it's a really great spot, but it's just down the road from that second Costco was supposed to open up in Tri-Cities. Because it's like the epitome of the growth part of Tri-Cities, and Pasco is a Santa Fe corridor right here. And so it's just kind of sitting right there. But, the average deal size in Tri-Cities, for a local regional buyer is kind of $2.5 million. That's kind of what taps out. We have some wealthier people and some farmers and some asset diversification, sure, but $2.5 million. So anything above that is always Spokane, Portland, Seattle, Boise kind of shoppers, the attitude, that risk appetite. But that's a great building, and I think it's under market for the rates. We got good growth bumps and that kind of thing. So I think it's a really good spot to be without kind of more of a set it and forget it on that one, because it's newer, it's got leases, it's going to catch up to what market needs to be, which is like more like a $25 plus nets. A lot of these is like $21.50 blended right now. So that's a great option in Tri-Cities for someone else to buy in without doing much and needing to do much, and you kind of just let everything kind of go around it into it. But those owners and developers took a risk on that, and that's a good option. I like that one. And I also like got that warehouse out there at 2205 Commercial Avenue. Got 12,000 square foot on 1.8 acres for sale for 1.83. And, those are the ones that we need 10 more of those. That's currently under contract and gets tours all the time. I think we were talking about that actually through some other stuff, your mutual client. And, but got that and kind of working on some new land plays out there too, kind of working with a couple farmers and their kind of 8 to 12 acres of industrial land that just haven't sold forever, and kind of talk to them through about, let's work backwards. What are you going to exchange into instead of taking your, I bought this for 30 grand in 1978 kind of thing, and now it's worth $8 million. And we're working backwards, kind of using ideas like that. Hey, these investment exchange ideas, to work backwards and say, hey, let's get your land on the market for sale for, $7 a square foot. That still hits. That still has room to grow. I think some of that Boise pricing that kind of crept in our industrial post-COVID, 9, 10, 11, $12 a square foot, doesn't quite pencil on the market.
Yeah, no, we're seeing the same thing here in the Seattle area. Is, let's say land prices peaked at $50 a foot. In some markets, now those are $35 if it exists. Even well, I would say most of the new land deals, there's hair on it. There's some sort of wetlands issue. There's topographical issue. There's weird shapes. So there's not a lot of land left that's like, outstanding, um, industrial land that's easy to entitle and easy to build. There's a lot of hair on it, but I would think that you still have a lot of growth in your market. Um, who, what type of users go out and look? I'm assuming they're users. So, say you've talked to a farmer and they've got a plot of land, or they have multiple parcels that are zone industrial. Um, who are the type of users or tenants that look at that type of stuff?
It's since we kind of don't have the developers per se to kind of say, hey, how come you guys don't have more of this product? Hey, we'll get out there and do that. And I think the problem right now is, we've been talking to those people, a lot of them at SIOR and these ski trips, right? But a lot of them are, tied up in other markets. They went to Spokane, or they're outside, they're sitting on some square feet outside Nampa, or, they're waiting for some recovery in other markets to come into Tri-Cities, even though there's no one here to play, but the end users are what I'm trying to, like, the carrot and the stick, which is like, hey, these are all nationally traded Fortune 200 companies that want to be here. We have our handful that want 100 to 500,000 square feet. I had a 150,000 square foot. It was the largest contiguous square foot. 2 years ago out in Burbank, which is just like 8 minutes east of Pasco, which is getting a lot of love these days. And maybe a fifth city to add to the MSA, but that's kind of picking up. But it's hey, you got this big data coming in. You have these larger expansion of retail, but we have all the building supplies. Now we're having the building suppliers expand. Hey, we want to be here. Our clients are down the road. We need 25,000 square feet, national credit. So we have all the raw, ground up building supplies. We have all the food and beverage that's kind of coming. We have the actual manufacturing, that little bit of the footprint here that makes stuff. But we have a lot of fruit and a lot of ag and all the kind of components that go from the farm to the product and out. And I've been really learned a lot about the kind of the farm side of the industrial side of it, getting into all this last probably 8 years. And but it's all national tenant, and even if it's regional, and some of these things are very strong, but they're asking for is 50,000 square foot increments, and that's
So
just all those things.
if you were to wave your magic wand and
Hmm.
have some product, describe what that would be.
Ooh, perfect. I would, and I'll stagger it so it's friendly for developers versus just shooting for the moon here. But it's like this. I mean, well, let's phase it in. But we basically need 100,000 square foot floor buildings with 20, really demisable down to 15 to 25,000 square feet. I still think there's a handful of 100,000 square foot users that could step up in 6 months from right now. I think there's a handful of 50,000 square footers that could step up. But the bulk of that Tri-City growth of local, regional, tertiary around us needs 15 to 25,000 square feet. And they're suffering in 8,000 square feet, 1988 modified gross, but they're publicly traded and need real legit product. So give me 100,000 square foot of those kind of floor plates.
So what kind of rents, what kind of shell rent could you get for that? So let's assume that a user or a tenant was going to take down the whole building.
When we did that 150,000 square footer, that was 2023, 4. I think we're getting 86 cents a square foot, triple net. So, a little under $10 there. And I
Yeah.
think that's probably what we would get or more for that product, because there's nothing existing. The market share is ripe to get in and get going. And we've had some proposals talk about where, hey, can I get 90 cents a square foot, and above $1? And I think we can, because Spokane is, Spokane has a lot more inventory, and they're definitely a little more of a soft side with the inventory they have going back up. But they're charging $1.03 to $1.15 for dry shell. And I think there's an opportunity. And I'll say, hey, Spokane's this price. That's what it costs now. And a lot of people that are in the business know that's what it is. So they're almost expecting $1 a square foot, give or take.
Yeah, and the reality is Spokane's too far away to serve the market on a regular basis. And what kind of premium would there be? Say you're all chop that up to four, say you had four different nodes, 25,000 feet. What's the difference there?
I think you can probably get. I think you can get. 12 to $14 a square foot net.
Okay.
For those setups. Throwing a little bit of office, and you're giving me some dock high, a couple grades. Those things, those essentially basic things we don't have here. We have no dock high. I love getting these co-broker matrices to fill out, and it's like, yeah, I'm serious. That's all we had of dock high. But that's where I think the premium would be. And I think the $12 to $14 a square foot for the smaller setups.
Well, so what's been, I mean, that all makes sense. Is there just not the risk tolerance for a developer to go and spec it? It sounds like that to go out and speculative build 100,000 feet. I mean, you're going to be, uh, that's an expensive proposition to buy some dirt and then put up a sign and pray.
It is, and I'm going to realize that through my cycle of asking, or changing some of my pitches. I know I want to ask for this, but I get the value proposition. Well, okay, kid. Well, I'd rather just put $10 million and go buy the dips in the market than play that game. currently, which is a thrill thing. Hey, risk appetite. Um, but it has been hard because it it looks suspicious for the ask of, all right, broker Derrick, you're asking for this. You think this is a great play. How come you can't get anyone locally to do it then? How come you're not involved, in it? Or how come, some other generational wealthy farmers don't want to build that on their land kind of thing? And I just think that we really are a kind of a conservative, risk averse town. That is in our nature. It's very reflected in that North Richland culture, and the farmer attitude too. I mean, even though farmers hell of a risk every day, they're like, oh, I'm done playing risk, man. I want to just do something simple. So I feel like that is kind of what's the blessing, which is the opportunity, but also the curse because we can't solve it ourselves. So it's like, well, rather go deal shop in a different market or be busy in my own backyard, or hey, I'll get to you next. That sounds great. I just need to finish up this other 2 million square feet in XY market and then come there. And I think really Moses Lake and Wenatchee figured it out pretty quick in 2019, 2020, because I think they grabbed a ton of potential users that we couldn't land in here and no one wanted to spec develop and there wasn't any existing product. And I think Wenatchee and Moses Lake figured it out to go grab some real talent out there and kind of show us what we could do or what we maybe should have done as well.
Yeah, I've got it's funny, we have these shows and I always seem to get ideas of about, opportunity. And I know a couple developers that I think might have the risk tolerance to go over there and spec something. And we'll talk maybe offline about that after. But it sounds, I've talked about this for 6 years. Like, um, somebody that goes and builds 100 and then you can demise it, that it would do really well leasing up. But when there's not a lot of that product, then people are like, why isn't there any of this product? They don't want to be pioneering. But
Exactly, which has been our biggest thing in Tri-Cities is, and it's hard because I am a kind of at least a creative pioneer. As I get deeper in my career and hopefully pockets, I can kind of do that in different ways too. But I think that was kind of my one of my justifications for the SIOR focus was like, listen, I wanted to be in this Silver Fox community where no one can give me shit for being young and passionate. Hey, I'm telling these facts for a reason. If I had all that money, I'd be in there with you too. But that's what I wanted to be was, hey, this kind of consistent dude that understood the deal, that wasn't feeding BS, but also saw upside, economic opportunity, and the next domino. Because if I can get someone in, I believe in what we're doing here. But it's just keep getting slapped in the face for the same kind of thing. Oh, we need more land. Oh, it's FutureWise. Oh, we need an annex. Oh, it's port. And it's like, dang it. But I do think that it's been it was the second fastest growing, asset class in rents besides multifamily, since COVID, and for a reason. And I think that land prices and people, sellers, know that the only way to kind of get a deal in development right now is on the land, because the cost right now, energy codes in our state of Washington that all rolled out. Everyone's kind of still getting sticker shock from last year to this new season. So someone savvy that understands that we can kind of start smaller, like, hey, if you want to build 50 and get that going as your test, we can do it. But there's just that case study that needs to be done. And we kind of keep celebrating these big wins from the city's perspective. And I get it, Dairy Gold facility, everybody's owner user. And so that's showing that there's a credit there, but that developer that's going to do it hasn't quite done it yet. And if they have, they're land banking, they haven't pulled the trigger yet. So definitely let's start offline because retail dreams, industrial epiphany.
That's good stuff. Well, we're 54 minutes into this episode. So what's funny is that when I first started doing this thing, I thought people wanted 12-minute episodes, and the first person I interviewed was I think we were like 35 minutes, and that felt short because there's so much to talk about. What about maybe let's talk about one more story that of a deal that maybe took a long time, had some twists and turns because we all have those. And I'm putting you on the spot here because we didn't talk about it, but maybe share one more story about an interesting deal.
For sure. I do want to dude, I've seen it in my career, like these deals that I'm going for now, and it's hard to find a 50,000 square foot deal and above in Tri-Cities, right? There's, you know, 18 offices that are big and, 42 warehouses above that, in general. So, all right, there's my scale to pull from. Do they always take me 3 or 4 years to get done? Like, is that really what it's going to be? And also, how can I plan for that and budget that and be real with that too? But, it's always outside buyers, it seems like, but except those local developers. So
Mhm.
on the spot, I would say Javelin Juggernaut. And so this was a referral from so it was two buildings, two office buildings. One's 112,000 square foot, 7-story building, and it was been shut down for basically a decade. I grew up knowing it as the Floor building, the Floor Daniels, that all the engineers that worked for the lab, Hanford, in the 7-story building, various stages. So that's big, bro. Little bro's next door, 50,000 square footer. Lights are on, half occupied. It's one of the few parking garages we have in town in Tri-Cities. More of a parking lid. It's got a U.S. Corps of Engineers creek that runs underneath it. That's fun. So it's set on like 11 acres, but through a land lease with the city. And so the developer was from the first non-recourse give back deal. So he refinanced it for, let's call it $10 million and give it back to the bank. CW Capital called me and said, hey, we need you to help us sell this thing. We don't know anything about it. Should be pretty easy sell. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a big building. So land lease, Corps of Engineers, parking deck lid that had issues, fault issues. Totally vacant, giant story building and a small one. And not make it be a whole episode because it took up a lot of my life and I think some of my gray hair from it. But the biggest issue was that vacant building and no one knew what to do with it. It's too big. It was too big for Tri-Cities. If it was your market, it'd be like, look at this redevelopment play. It's apartments all day long, mixed use. And, that tried to happen, but it didn't happen. But anyway, true to everyone. My biggest chance of getting that thing leased or sold, but it couldn't be leased because it really needed to be sold from the debt structure and all that was involved, which made it so many cooks in the kitchen. So many people involved with the decision making and some politics. So it was just the ingredients of just like a disaster. Like my dad said, like run, and I'm like, no, I'm going to solve this. This is 1,500 new jobs, Dad. And we're working together at that point. I think he retired and those things. But anyway, the worst part, so part of it was this healthcare. That's my one answer to get someone in that big building. That's the only way I'm going to sell it is if I get this thing leased up. Like it's pretty vanilla office, some TIs and a healthcare budget. Like, let's go. So I had a deal going with the large, medical user, that probably owns a lot of hospitals now in our area. And it's near the main campus, down the road in Richland. Anyway, I had an LOI for 70,000 square feet of it. So like four floors or something like that. LOI, which means nothing, but hey, this is giant. We got this thing signed. If this deal goes through to a lease, now I actually have a chance to sell it. And we took off that weekend, Kathleen and I, to New Orleans for a wedding. And so went down to New Orleans, spent a week above a second floor rooftop on Bourbon Street. So that was fun watching. I wanted to do a book called Bourbon Street Economics after just people watching at all hours of that time. So we came back home and I was like on the way back to the airport, I was like, hey, let's drive by the Javelin Juggernaut. Let's just make sure it's still standing because I want to go to work tomorrow and feel good about this LOI. And this might be my first kind of super large payday.
Yeah.
Drive by the building and I see people outside at the bottom of the floor kind of pointing. And I'm like, what are they pointing at? So I kind of pull in the big parking garage area and there is water leaking out of all the window seals from all 7 stories.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, what is going on? And I actually just pulled the video up last week of like me walking up the firewall, the stairwell, and just all the water. It was used the weekend before from our SWAT team for training exercises that left the ladies bathroom sink on, clogged, flooded the entire building.
7 stories.
7 stories. So present day, and they had to do it in this part of remediation and just everything, because you throw that in there now. And all of a sudden I have an insurance claim of this giant building. One more real reason to never buy this goddamn thing, which they ended up cutting all the drywall out, from, kind of shoulders down every single floor. So right now, still just no sheetrock, no walls, no nothing. And so that was like, give up, Derrick. Like, this is not going to happen, and kind of thing. But I ended up selling it, the whole thing, to local developers. It was their first team up to do this redevelopment. They wanted to do mixed use in the big brother. Little brother was already kind of put together, just needs kind of a facelift. And I sold it to them. It took me, I think, 3.5 years for $1,050,000. They turned around and then bought the land from the city, and that took some time. And it was a real nightmare with the Corps of Engineers and this insurance damage on the building and the foundation lines and all the things I learned to be aware of or ask those questions before I leave now. Hey, any geotech studies? And that sure saved me 4 days of time, just those things you learn along the way. But those developers that bought it, they fixed it, they got the land acquired, and they actually just sold Big Brother, 1,200 Javelin, to the same developer who I sold the juice plant to, the juice jungle. So he's kind of got a reputation to, hey, he sees the opportunity. He's got the brass and the kind of balls behind it to like, hey, I'll go for it. I see it. I can't build for this, and I'll figure a way to get it done. And that's a Javelin juggernaut that and that will hopefully continue. And I just showed it last 2 weeks ago to a new healthcare company that wants to look at the whole thing. So it's a very full circle, and like, wow, that's 7 years ago.
Well, that's crazy because, prior to the time when you sold it and did all that work and made no money, your earnings per hour was in the cents, probably not
brackets.
dollars.
I'm sure it was in brackets.
Yeah. But sounds like maybe there's more opportunity there going forward. But that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a good story.
Yeah, it's cool to tell, not to live.
not to live. In fact, that reminds me of a deal. There was a deal in Puyallup where this investor, it was a cold storage facility, old cold storage, ammonia-based cold storage facility.
Mm-hmm.
So they have it under contract, and it catches fire. The whole thing burns down, and most people would be like, "Oh no." But the investor was like, heck yeah, because believe it or not, I don't know how this works. They got the insurance proceeds, okay, because they had it under contract, and they end up buying it and then getting the insurance proceeds, and they made out like a bandit. And it was, I don't know why that doesn't make sense to me. Like,
but
why would
risk reward, right? I mean, they put themselves in a situation to kind of take on a risk, and like that was the opportunity that only present itself in that situation that they could take advantage of, and that's how I actually, I think that.
Yeah, well, they just happen to be lucky, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean that helps
Yeah.
too. But
So
exactly,
they ended up getting, and then they demoed the building, and then they ended up sitting on some land that's worth, 30 some bucks a foot, and they don't have that much money into it. But it's crazy how real estate can take twists and turns. But that's a cool story, and it sounds that story is going to continue. So maybe we'll have you on here in a couple years, and I'd like to hear about maybe the success of what'd you call it, the Javelin juggernaut.
the Jadwin juggernaut.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's just too. It was. I learned a tremendous amount about it, and I think it helped get my GFI requirements done. I think, or close to it. Then I got like a top 50 largest office deal at least in the NAI family when I was there. So I got some notoriety out of it, but really learning. But yeah, made $0 net on it. But the lessons of what it was, and my thing is, how to advance it, how to learn as fast as possible by getting exposed to all these deals so that I can learn more and then go solve it. Because if I see a deal now, it's like too easy. I'm weirded out by. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen next?
What's
You know,
wrong?
what am I not looking at right now? What am I did? You know, how old is the phase one, or how it just you get kind of traumatized by some of these deals, but you learn to be a better broker because of it, or say no. Hey, that's a great opportunity. I don't have the capacity in the next 24 months to do that, or this is what it would take to get me involved. I mean, really,
Yeah.
how to better advise for my and advocate for myself for results and my team, and also knowing that it's a series of kind of a full time contact sport, and so how do we protect ourselves and our clients and expectations from these dealings?
Well, you bring up some good points that it takes a while to learn. So, for instance, I'm I working on a deal that is going to take a lot of time. And, the first 5, 7 years, 10 years in the business, I was always told there are set fees, right? This is market fee for
Mm-hmm.
this project. This is a market fee for that. But now, this opportunity, for instance, it's going to take a while, multiple years. So then I said, hey, I'm willing to take this on, but this is my fee, right? And now maybe we all need in our listings to put if there's any acts of God and your fees reduced by by 10 times because of the value that gets changed, maybe there should be an additional fee in there. That sounds great as a broker, but I don't know if I'm an owner, I would agree to that.
I know, but you do see, it gives you something to stand on, right? Versus being like, oh, I'm just expensive, deal with it. But it's like, hey, I know what you're thinking, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, and or whatever it may be, but I've been in the situation before. Here's my comp, if you will, and it took me 24, all these things. So hey, it's I'm 100 basis points more expensive, or this is a retainer, or this is kind of the structure out of time. But I'm trying to roll those lessons and confidently stand for the worth that we're doing to put in. Because I'm also like, well, if it's not me, who locally and regionally is going to give you that same answer information or question the stuff that I'm questioning? No one.
Well,
Not no
at the end
one.
of the
Not that I'm
day,
special all the way. Just
yes. But in the end of the day, we only get paid when we perform. So, there's a lot of people, I would think there's a lot of people in your market that don't have the breadth of knowledge that you've gained because you've done some super complicated deals, like crazy complicated deals. And, it's not just on a silver platter. Most brokers, or I'm going to call them agents, commercial agents,
Mm-hmm.
um, don't have that knowledge because they haven't done these complicated deals, and they're going to trip, and and so landlord is going to run through two or three of those agents that don't know how to manage one of these really complicated deals. So it can really set you apart, and you could probably, in some cases, set your fee, higher than most because of your experience.
Exactly. I look at that as those years because again, hey, starting 14th year this summer, and it's like all I've done over probably 350 transactions and $350 million in deals now, and I really try to watch my average deal and my avatar and try to grow it along the way because it's extra challenging in a tertiary market. And but it is. It's like, hey, I know I'm more expensive. I Massimo, coached for a few years now with Rob Powell. Shout out to Rob. That hey, your fee is your fee for a reason. If you can support it and it's more than the other, that's because of the value you're bringing to it, or the reality that hey, it's going to be a pain in the ass, and it's going to be a tax pain in the ass, and then it's going to be this pain in the ass for the city. So hey, not sugarcoating it, here it is. And if you want to come back to me in 8 months when those agents don't get it done, and we now you see the difference, right? And that's kind of I think a lot of there's some listing switches up right now. I think that things that didn't get sell in 2024 leaked into Q1, Q2 this year, and I get we're losing some, gaining some clients, and we're having all these new conversations. Well, hey, I was getting done for XYZ. And I said, I get it. But here's kind of the structure, or here's why we are. And if not, we don't want to just take listings. I want to take stuff that I believe in that can get done, from my own accord of mission accomplished, client needs and goals met, both parties, economic output for the Tri-Cities community, and one more domino to fall in our favor of it. You know what? You guys don't look sus anymore. That shit makes sense. Let's go develop. Let's spec. Let's bring it. Let's storm the gates. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to, is we're still kind of just sitting here. About Tri-Cities. All the indicators show it's opportunistic and upside and steady. There just hasn't been a billionaire to shake shit up yet, to kind of really do something. Not that we need a billionaire, but just something that understands scale, size, and can come bring it and deliver it. And we can spoon feed it in the beginning. We can make these smaller floor plates and nodes to show that there are those users, but a lot of opportunity. And I think the cities are doing a good job of getting more land. And as much as I wanted it 5 years ago, so I can have some too, and we can develop these projects, but it's maybe the second coming of the next industrial revolution here in Tri-Cities, which is all 3 cities have industrial land to develop and a good footprint and a good, market to showcase on, and success. Let's go.
Well, if I've learned something today, it's that you love the Tri-Cities and you believe in your community. You're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're beating the drum for Tri-Cities and their economic growth. So, Derrick, it's been great talking with you, and I look forward to having you on the show again. Again, please hit the like button and subscribe. But another great podcast, learning about a great guy in a cool market. Derrick, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Craig. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and look forward to having you on our show as well.
What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Derrick?
You can use my fax machine number. It's 15. I'm joking. Hey, you can find us on all the socials. Stricker, CRE, but Derrick, DERR. That's important. DERRICK at strickercre.com. And would love to chat about Tri-Cities and talk more about opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Derrick. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Craig.